name is Cheryl Erickson, and I'm the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in Guidance 1, we will be looking at and discussing discipline. So thinking about guidance and discipline when it comes to young children. But before we get started, just a reminder to read Chapter 1, as this video isn't a replacement for your daily readings. So when we think about the terms guidance and discipline, often discipline has been looked at as a negative term and not something productive or a good fit when it comes to young children. But the term discipline isn't really a negative term. In fact, it comes from the word disciple, which is to teach or to lead. So discipline does have its place done in a positive way. So thinking about guiding and teaching children, it helps them to learn some personal responsibility regarding their behavior and the choices that they're making. And it's also a good gauge for them in teaching practices for children to understand the differences between right and wrong. So we will use the term discipline, we will use the term guidance in many different scenarios when we're talking about helping children problem solve or dealing with difficult situations. Discipline should be about teaching, not about punishment. So punishment isn't something that is a proper guidance technique for children. Punishment is usually meaning retribution or almost a hurtful type of solution to a problem. So children don't learn positive ways to deal with situations, and they don't learn right and wrong from being punished. What will stand out in their mind is more what happened during that punishment than the behavior. So not a good approach to use for young children. So our emphasis is going to be on teaching children how to be responsible for their behaviors, and we want to do much more than change just the undesirable behavior. We want them to gain some experience from that situation and develop some moral autonomy, learning the differences between right and wrong. So that would be one of the goals that we would establish for the children in our childcare facilities. When it comes to discipline, we want to have age-appropriate goals for our children. So we're going to look at the ages of the children that we're dealing with and consider preschool children in this situation from 2 to 5. A 2-year-old child is going to have limited experiences and understanding than a 4-year-old. So how we are going to deal effectively with children is going to depend on their ages. When it's a 2-year-old child, you're going to be giving them more words in short sentences, but a 4-year-old child, you're going to be able to get down to their level and ask them questions and hopefully come to some solutions regarding that behavior. So it's more of also maintaining self-concept and self-esteem. Self-concept is, more of that moral autonomy and guided by your own intuition of knowing what's right and wrong, opposed to how you feel about yourself. So you want to feel good about yourself, but that self-concept that really is that driving force of understanding morals is what we want to teach the child, that they have that sense of, yeah, that's really not a good choice to make, and I need to do this instead. So those are the types of techniques and things that we want to do to promote good self-concept and self-esteem for children. So just to define self-concept, it's the understanding of who we are and what we want to do. And self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves. So, if you have a good self-concept, you are confident, learner, so to speak, and there's also levels of that as well. So as a 3-year-old, you're not going to be a confident learner just yet. You're still gaining some experiences. And I can say, as you know, in your teens and adulthood, you're still learning different things as well. So that confidence in learning and growing is something that takes place all through your lives, just as adults and teenagers have more experience than children. And I always look at it as, and something I've said to my students, is when you think about those experiences when you're dealing with problems and conflicts within a childcare center, you look at a child that's 2 or 3 years of age, compared to, say, a teenager who's 15 or 16. They've had 15 or 16 years living in this world to develop those experiences, and a 2-year-old has 2 years. So that's a lot of time difference. They're really just learning and growing about the world around them, and that's why we really need to guide them and shape them. Self-regulation is a term we've talked about a lot in the different lessons that we're learning about, and self-regulation is really controlling that behavior and making choices about behavior. So in a lot of the readings that you will do, it'll talk about, and in particular, this book believes children cannot become self-regulated if they are being regulated by others. So we have that moral autonomy where it's an inner control versus that autonomy, which us as adults tend to control the actions of children, and we want them to be independently thinking about what they're doing and making good choices. And when I say that as well, I want to express to you that when it comes to behaviors of children, there are no bad children. It's just the choices that they're making are not good choices. So just, keep that in mind when you are having to deal with challenging behaviors. It's really a lot of children's understanding, and they don't understand, and that's typically why that they do what they do. So it's a choice. It's not really them and them being bad. We have different types of models when it comes to discipline. We're really going to focus more on the constructive than anything. Behavioralistic approaches are usually more of a control and obedience, and a lot of times it's a punishment or reward situation, which doesn't really change the behavior. You're either, again, punished, which children tend to focus on the punishment and really not on what they've done. And in a lot of situations, for example, if you go back and ask the child, why did you get sent to your room? Why were you removed? A lot of times they don't remember what it is that they've done. So that is not effective if they can't remember why it was that they were punished. And so rewards aren't necessarily a positive thing either, because children then tend to expect something in return for doing a task, and that's not okay either. We want them to, again, gain that sense of that good feeling when making a good choice is really more important than anything. And maturist types of goals is really more, it's promoting independence and individualism, which is a good thing, but often with that approach, there is no guidance discipline either, so that's really not conducive to effective teaching and learning outcomes for children. So when we look at constructivist goals, it's to help that child develop that internal moral compass, learning what's right, what's wrong, that personal sense of doing the right thing. So that should be our focus when we're looking at goals for children in a childcare center. That constructivist approach helps children learn through self-governance and experiences. So relating things that have happened in the past are experiences. So do you remember when you did that last time, what happened? So reflecting back almost often helps them, or when they're able to self-regulate and they can remember that on their own, and then they decide not to make that choice again because it didn't have favorable outcomes. So we as adults effectively guide the children. We develop relationships, we listen to them, and that's how respect develops with children. You get down to their levels, you talk to them, you gain a relationship, and you teach them, you treat them respectfully, and then they in turn will learn to be respectful to you as well. And that is really the key to success as well in this constructivist approach. It also includes those problem-solving techniques, which we really, when we're doing that, really need to get down to the child's level and talk to them. Standing above them is almost more authoritarian and negative. Getting down at eye level, being positive with those facial expressions, showing that you're listening, body language, gestures, nods, understanding, that's really going to teach them that, yes, they are listening, you are there for me, you're helping me through this. So they'll learn through mutual respect, which is really, really important. Think back to a time in your life maybe where somebody approached you about something maybe you did wrong, or tried to tell you something and you didn't know them, you didn't have any relationship, and you thought, who are you? I don't know you, or you maybe have had a negative experience with that individual. You're really not going to take too much out of that conversation because it's really not meaningful. They didn't really maybe pay attention or listen to you in the past. So you just you just kind of walk away and you don't listen. And typically that's what children will do if there is no relationship or there's no respect there. They're not going to listen to you until that part of it is gained. So that's a really important piece in guiding children effectively as well. So we've talked a little bit about moral autonomy and wanting children to learn, having them develop that internal compass to control their behaviors. Children need to learn basically why it is that we want them to do certain things. So explaining, what the reason is behind that request. So for example, if it's a situation where maybe water from the water table has spilled on the floor and you want them to mop up the spill, explain to them why the water needs to be mopped up so your friends won't slip and fall. That would be something concrete and easy to understand. So you're explaining to them what you want them to do and why. And that again is really important to that mutual respect as well. As far as guiding choices, again, regarding developing that moral autonomy, children need to have choices so they can make better decisions. So when you look at giving them choices, make it simple. Choice would be 1 to 2 things, not to be too complicated or overwhelming. We all get better once we practice things as well. And so that when you're practicing, you're gaining experience, you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining independence as well. So experiences and consequences for small decisions when they are young helps them learn how to make a good choice later in life. So going back to those choices as well, If they make a choice, if you give them two choices, and they make a choice that doesn't have favorable results for them, they're going to learn something as well. So an example with that might be asking a child to put on their mitts. You need to have mitts on, it's cold outside. If they choose not to put on their mitts, what's going to happen is their hands are going to be cold. And so that's not going to have favorable results. Next time when you say, remember to take your mitts outside or put on your mitts, they'll be more inclined to do that because they will remember that their hands were cold when they were outside the last time. And so there are things that choices, remember, have to be reasonable, have to be logical, and have to be within best practices. So you're not going to tell a child that has a soiled diaper that, do you want me to change it or not? You need to change that diaper. A good choice there could be, do you want me to change your diaper now, or do you want to go after the next child I change? So that would be more reasonable and more of a choice because at the end of the day, they need to have that diaper changed. Treating the cause rather than the symptoms. So we really want to not always be putting out fires. And what I mean by putting out fires is just dealing with a problem, solving it, dealing with a problem and solving it. We have to figure out why these problems keep coming up. And your textbook gave a really good explanation of why you need to do that. And basically, it's like weeding your garden. If you don't get to the root of the problem or pull those roots out, there's always going to be weeds. So we really always have to look at what the root of the problem is in order to figure out why consistently certain problems are going to happen. And you're always going to have, some conflicts between children and maybe conflicts over toys. Some kids have good days, some kids have not so good days, and us as adults, we experience that as well. But if it's an ongoing problem within your environment, that's cause to really take note and figure out why this continually keeps happening. So, some of the other solutions it says is asking yourself, what does the child need in order to act in a desirable way? So maybe some observations on that particular child. And then effective discipline plans must be based on the answer to the questions. So looking at, guiding them appropriately. Is it something I, as an adult, am doing? Is it approach I'm taking that a child is doing this? And then what can I do to help better deal with that more effectively, or help the child deal with that effectively? So in a lot of times with behaviors, we're going to want to take time to observe and to discover the cause of that behavior problem, and that's kind of where we're weeding our gardens, so to speak, and getting to the root of the issue. Observing is an excellent way to discover the child's developmental needs, so it can tell you, where that child is developmentally, and also discovering the cause of that problem and figuring out a solution for that problem. And so there's different things that we're going to want to consider, again, within our program. So I'll just cover a few of them regarding behavioral issues as well. And so, one of the things is developmentally appropriate curriculum. Is the curriculum you're providing for the child age appropriate, as well as where they are developmentally? If it's something that is too complex, you're going to have some challenging behavior, and maybe that's in the way they're using the material inappropriately. So you might want to take some time to observe children to see if your goals and are developmentally appropriate. Is your environment set up effectively? which if your environment is set up effectively, we know that less behavioral problems will occur. So if it's something within your environment that is working against the children or the materials, you could have more behavioral problems as well. So you really need to look at children's unmet needs. Is there something within the environment that isn't meeting their needs, and how can we go about fixing that? So taking time to observe can really make a difference in how children are reacting and behaving within that environment. So that does conclude Chapter 1, thinking about guidance and discipline for young children. If you do have any questions regarding Chapter 1, please do see your instructor, as well as checking in to ensure that you haven't missed any handouts or assignments pertaining to Chapter 1.